Welcome to the Washington Heights Church podcast. We're so glad you're here. Each week, we bring you the latest Sunday message filled with God's Word to help strengthen your faith and deepen your walk with Christ. Whether you're tuning in from home, your commute, or anywhere in between, we're thrilled to have you join our community. So, grab a cup of coffee, find a cozy spot, and let's get started.
So last week we began a series entitled Love Gives to track along with these weeks where we are doing just that, where we are in Love Gives, where we do projects each and every week outside of ourselves. And just before we jump into the message for today, I want to remind you that we've created a devotional that tracks along with this series as well. And these are available at all the exits if you didn't get one yet. And each and every week after Sunday, there's the opportunity to spend a little bit more time with it, make it a little bit more personal, and apply it to your own life. And so we just want to make sure that you know that these are available. And if you're watching online, there's a link that you can click to get that as well. And while we're talking online, can we welcome a couple groups of people who watch us on a consistent basis online? One is a retirement community called Summit Vista down in Taylorsville in Salt Lake County, and there's about 30 people on a Sunday morning who gather to watch there. Would you welcome them? They can hear you. And also, you may know, you may not know, we have a team of people that go into the Weber County Jail every week and bring the service to the people there and spend some time with the folks there. And folks at Weber County Jail, we are so glad to call you a part of Washington Heights. Would you welcome them as well? So here's where we began last week. We were in what is often referred to as a love chapter, and as we do Love Gives, we thought there could be benefit in understanding more about what love is and what love does, as we are going to be making that a reality over these next number of weeks. And we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and that, is part of an overall letter that is actually part of a book in the New Testament that has 16 chapters. And here's where we begin. The Apostle Paul is writing to some people who are really gifted and really insightful and really busy and doing a lot of good things, but he has said, you're missing an essential element of what it means to journey with God and with each other and the world that is around you. Because if love is not at the heart and soul of what you're doing, all the giftedness can lead in the direction that it did for them, where they would look at their gifts and they're getting pretty proud of their gifts. But those gifts are given by God for the purposes of God, but we can turn them inward on ourselves. Or God can give us these tremendous insights to be able to come alongside people and to help them. But all of a sudden I can envy what somebody else does. Not the gifts that I've been given. I want somebody else's gift. And that was happening. And then we can get real busy and maybe in the busyness think that we're somehow earning our way into God's good favor. And so what we call the love chapter is really Paul throwing a hand grenade into the misunderstanding of some people who are journeying with God, but making it more about themselves. And so he begins by talking about how essential love is. Here's where we began last week. If I speak in the tongues of men and angels, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. I can have tremendous gifts, but if love isn't there, I'm missing it. And then he says, if I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, this is miracle performing faith, right? But do not have love, I am nothing. There's an essential element of love that has to be there. And if I give all I possess to the poor and give my body over to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I can be the busiest person in the room. But if that is not coming out of a motive of love and of response, but I think that somehow I'm gaining something, he says, I gain nothing. I earn nothing. And then after really calling those people out for turning those things in a direction that God did not give them for, he says that this is what love is like. And this is often read at our weddings, but it was written really as a way for people to understand, what does love really look like? Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. And it's as if Paul's giving us a definition of love. It's not just one thing. It is this multifaceted, incredible opportunity to respond to what God has given to us, because all those things are descriptive of what God has given to you and me. And then after he gives the definition of what it looks like, he says, now here are some things that love always does. And this is where we're going to be this morning. Love, always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. So love is not just something that we know about. Love isn't just words that we speak. Love is not just an emotion. It includes all of those things, but these are all action words. So love ultimately plays itself out in real life. There are some things that love always does. So let's break these phrases down and see what they can mean to you and me as we seek to make love real in our world. So first, always protects. What does that mean? And to put it in terms that we can, apply to our lives, love rallies around the weak. And you see this mentioned in the Bible over and over and over again. It is there so many times. I just want to give you one example of that. Psalm 82, defend the weak and the fatherless, uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. And when you see verses like that, it begins to expose a dynamic that needs to be present for love to be genuine. Because so often in this world, we can even do things that are good things, but we do them in the hope that something good will be coming back in return. Right? I love the fact that Pastor Jimmy shared what's happening down in Peru there when they went to the police station. They said, hey, what can we do for you? What do you want, right? Because so much of the world works that way. But in these descriptors, the weak, the fatherless, the poor, and the oppressed, there is this dynamic. These are folks who can do nothing back in return. You simply do it because it's the right thing to do. You do it because it's a thing that God has given to you. We mentioned that school in Kenya. We've been partnering with them. That school specializes in inviting either orphan children or children out of single-parent homes who would not have the opportunity to have an education like that if it were not for this school. Right? And so as we support that, and what can those kids do in return? The answer is nothing. And that's Paul's point. Love always protects. It's not looking for something coming back in return. That's why during Love Gives, one of the key phrases that comes along with it, it's a phrase that's been around here for a long time, no strings attached, no expectation of anything coming back. We do it simply because it's a response to what God has given to us. Here's a verse in the New Testament, 1 John chapter 3. If anyone has material possessions and sees his brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? And John is telling us that if we just kind of, don't even respond to that in any kind of way, the love that God has given to us, if it's present, it's going to respond in those kind of ways. No strings attached, no expectation of what is coming back in return. Here's how Samuel Johnson said this about 100 years ago. The true measure of a man is how he treats someone who can do him absolutely no good. What do you do for the person who can do nothing for you? Says a lot about where our hearts might be. Says a lot about where our love factor might be. And to back up a little bit, in the history, even where did Love Gives come from as a part of Washington Heights and some of the, efforts that we do outside of ourselves. Several years ago, as a staff, every week we work through either a book, a podcast, something like that. We have this learning component that we journey with together. And one of the conclusions that we came to as we try to understand who are we, where is God taking us, what is God asking us and inviting us to do, it came with this result where we said, we invite people to come here. That's great. We're going to continue to do that. But you know what we don't do? We don't meet people where they are. And we're not leading out into our community. Well, how do we want to lean out into our community? We want to lead out with love because that's how God has approached us, is with his love. And so we thought, okay, well, so how do we make this real? Well, let's go to our community. We went to Ogden City, sat down with the mayor, and we asked this question, hey, what do you need? What does Ogden need? And after, convincing him, we didn't want anything in return. He said, well, one of the things we ran out of money with in our budget, we were going to repaint all the fire hydrants in Ogden City. How many are there? 2,700 fire hydrants in Ogden City. And we said, you know what, we'll do it. And so we bought the paint, and Pastor Jimmy created these teams and broke the whole city down, and people went out on a Friday and a Saturday, and we painted 2,700 fire hydrants, those hideous Green Bay Packer colors, green and yellow, and it was terrible. Blue and silver would be much nicer, but that's just me. And it just began this momentum in this direction. The next year, we said, what if we came alongside some people in Ogden City who are having a hard time keeping up with their homes? And we worked outside of a number of homes, and one thing after another even led to this entire season called Love Gives. Why? Because we want to lead out with love that is looking for nothing in return. Why? Because that is how God has loved us. And love always protects. It rallies around the weak. And the weak can do nothing in response. But maybe that's the whole point. And in a world where so often it works that way, oh, you're doing something, what do you want? What an amazing antidote and difference in a day like ours. Just responding to the love that God has given to us. Love always protects. Love always trusts. What does that mean? That love assumes the best about people's motives. Now, when you first see love always trusts, and one of the translations puts it this way, love believes all things. And I think we might respond to that by saying, well, doesn't that set me up to be naive and to be taken advantage of? If I'm always going to trust, I trusted a person, they burned me. Then I trusted them again, and they burned me. Trusted them again, and they burned me. Are you telling me, Paul, I have to go back over and over again to do that? We're not talking about evaluating people's behavior. We're talking about what we assume about people's motives. Let me see if I can picture it for you this way, and this is something that was taught in a small group that I was a part of. And I'm going to do my best to kind of create a visual representation of this. There can be a difference between our expectations and people's behaviors. Right? He said he was going to be home at 6 o'clock. He's not home at 6 o'clock. She said she was going to take care of that. It's not done. And so there's this gap that can exist between expectations and behavior. And we all have a choice to make. What will we fill into the gap? What will we assume about the motives, right? We can evaluate somebody's behavior, but when we don't know the answer to the question, why weren't they home? Why didn't they take care of that? We can assume, either the best or the worst, and really there are two opportunities for us to respond to that. So let me ask you a question. When it comes to that gap between expectations and behavior, what do you tend to put into that space? What do you tend to assume about the people in your lives? Because what love always does, he's writing in the context of relationships. So this is what God has given to us, and now how do we make it real with each other? And so this is what love does as a community with the people in our lives. What do you assume about their motives? Learners in love learn to assume the best about others. Does that mean that, if somebody, let's talk an extreme example, if somebody's abusive and I just called to go back there again and again, we're not saying that. And again, when we evaluate behavior, there may be a time and a place for that. But when we're talking about not understanding why somebody did or did not do something, what do we put into that space? And there are many times and ways in which this can happen. Can I give you a real low-level example? So last week, somebody put in a prayer request. It's on one of those connection cards that you have in that chair in front of you there. And do you know what they wrote as a prayer request? Can you pray that people would be nice in the parking lot leaving church? No names were mentioned, but I think you know who you are, Thomas. Right? So somebody cuts you off as you're trying to get out of here, right? What are you going to assume about them? That they're a horrible person? We're going to respond in kind, or we can assume the best. Maybe they have a really important thing to get to. I don't know. And see, that's the thing. When we don't know why, we all tend to fill it with something. Love always trusts. Love learns to assume the best about somebody else's motives. Now again, we're not talking about evaluating behavior. We're always called to discernment in the Bible. What is discernment? Applying wisdom to real life. And we're called away from judgment. What is judgment? That's where we write people off. That's where we assume that their motives are always the worst, and we assume that there is no hope for them. We're called to discernment. We're called away from judgment. Love always protects. Love always trusts. And then the Apostle Paul says, love always hopes. Why is hope such an important part of love? You know, hope can seem fuzzy, it can seem uncertain. What does that really mean? And I want to give you a bit of a metaphor from real life that we can apply to our lives when it comes to understanding why hope is so important and so vital to love. Have you heard of the town of Flagstaff, Maine? And many people have not. It is a ghost town today, and I'll tell you why. Back in the 1930s, people were living in this New England village up there. Well, the U.S. government decided that they were going to build a hydroelectric dam. And it was going to create this reservoir, fill in this valley. Well, guess what was in the valley that was going to be filled in? Flagstaff, Maine was in that valley. So it was going to be eventually at the bottom of this reservoir. But the U.S. government came and said, hey, we're going to pay you for your property and for your homes. And this project isn't going to happen for another 20 years. And you're going to be able to live here rent-free, mortgage-free for 20 years. So we'll take care of you, and we're going to buy this and pay for it, and then eventually we'll move you. But you can live here in the meantime for free. But there's a reservoir coming. This town is going to be at the bottom of it. Now, I don't know about you. That sounds like not a bad deal, right? Would anybody like to live rent-free or mortgage-free for the next 20 years? That's not a bad deal. But do you know what happened on the other side of that? You would think maybe people would be encouraged by it. Well, there was a reporter who grew up in Flagstaff, Maine, and this idyllic New England kind of town there. He went there 2 years after that announcement was made to see how is the town and the townspeople, how are they responding to that? And do you know what he found when he got there? He found broken windows that had not been repaired. He found front porches that were falling apart. He found yards that were unkept. And he found garbage that was not picked up. And he wrote a whole article about it, and he has this one line in that article, where there is no faith in the future, there is no power in the present. So if you take that story as a metaphor, right, because why did those people stop doing all the things that would upkeep and maintain, their homes and where they lived? Because all they could see in the future was destruction. That there really was no future there. So why care for any of that? So we pick up that story and drop it onto our relationships. When there is no hope of the future of a relationship with someone, we may not take care of the repairs that need to be made in those relationships. And so maybe we don't fix the broken windows, maybe the conversations that ended badly, but we just never go back there. Or maybe we don't pick up the garbage of some of the things that were said or done and they are left completely undone. But love always hopes. And what does that mean? Love believes that people can change. That the future is not destruction. That the future is not without its possibility of people being something different then than they are now. That great theologian, Popeye the Sailor Man, put it this way. He said, I am what I am, and that's all that I am. But would you agree with me that with God, we don't say that? Because God has not said that. And that with God, there is the opportunity to be transformed by the power of God. But this idea that people don't change and we are the way that we are and that's all that we will ever be, I really believe it's so deeply ingrained in our culture that we really need to get God's view on it. One of the oldest expressions in the English language is this one: you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? People don't change. In fact, this sentiment is so widely known that there are many cultures that have a similar version of it. Let me give you a couple examples. Here it is in Spanish. An old parrot can't learn to speak. In French, you can't teach an old monkey to pull a funny face. The French. Who understands that? I don't know. And then here it is in German. Was Hanschen nicht lernt, lernt Hans nimmermehr. Which is what little Hans doesn't learn, big Hans will never learn. But here's what the Apostle Paul said in his next letter to these folks in Corinth. So from now on, we regard no one from a worldly point of view. We don't look at people the same way that the world looks at people. And it's easy to say, well, a leopard never changes their spots. People never change. They're always going to be who they are. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, the old has gone, the new is here. We are all on a journey that with God has the God-given potential through his power to transform us over time. So love always hopes. And that's a relational context as we walk with one another. And those people may not be who we think they should be today, but we do not give up that there is a tomorrow. But guess what? Somebody may be thinking about me that way. We are all on a journey of transformation. Love always protects. Love always trusts. Love always hopes. And love always perseveres. Love plays the long game. Love is not running a sprint, it's running a marathon. And so love does not give up. And so let me ask you this question. Is there someone in your life that you have given up on, where you have not persevered? And that doesn't mean that geographically you have to go back to something that's really unhealthy in terms of behavior. But is there somebody you have totally written off when the grace and the power of God can reach anyone? And so why does love persevere? Because that's what God's love has done for us. And it has the power to transform anyone. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Now, here's what I think we could potentially do on the other side of this. We might say, well, that's good, but I know some people who have some abilities with that are unlike anything else. They're certainly unlike what I have. And so this is, more doable for some people and maybe even undoable for others because of a skill set or a gifting or whatever it might be. But here's the thing. Love is the great equalizer. Anyone and everyone can do this, can do what love does. And I want to share a story with you that hopefully will drive that point home. Let me show you a picture here. The people on the left and right, that's Leon and Cheryl Hill. They were missionaries in Japan for many years, Washington Heights. This church supported them in their effort to help people meet and follow Jesus in Japan. And in the center is Jeffrey Maki. He is their adopted son. They adopted him in Japan when he was an infant. It was clear from early on that Jeffrey was severely autistic. I met Jeffrey in his adult years, and it was easy to assume that there was a significant cognitive impairment with Jeffrey. He cannot speak. He makes noises. His body movements are very uncertain and erratic and jerky. And when you spend time, there's no communication, so it's easy to think, well, there's somebody with great limitation. But maybe you also know this about autism, that while there are limitations, there is this one lane of that brain that is like a superpower. Well, they did some brainwave study on Jeffrey, and they found the language center of his brain is functioning at an extremely high level. And it has allowed him to be able to decode languages without any help from anybody else. So he is given books in another language that he opens up, and he begins to see the words, and his brain is able to decode that language. He learns languages just by looking at them. And to this day, Jeffrey speaks 15 languages. And a couple of those, one is Biblical Greek, which is what the New Testament was written in, and the other is Biblical Hebrew, which is what the Old Testament was written in. I had to study those things for years, and it was hard. He just looks at it, and he knows it. It's amazing. But no words come out of his mouth. But you know what else he has done? He's become a blogger. Because he's able to write through a tablet and his fingers fly across that screen and he writes and he types. Can I read you one of his blog posts from spring of this year? This is a time of year that we see cherry blossoms in Japan. Japan is famous for its cherry blossoms. People like to eat a meal under the cherry blossoms. This spring has been very rainy. The rain seemed to come as soon as the cherry blossoms started. Rain and cold weather make it uncomfortable to sit under the blossoms and do anything. The other day, Mom and I went out on our morning walk at a local park. We were the only ones there. As we walked, we saw cherry blossoms in full bloom. The delicate light pink blooms covered the trees. Then we came upon a patch of beautiful daffodils in all full yellow radiance. We circled the park 4 times for our personal private viewing of God's splendor. It was so uplifting. Now think of this sentence with somebody who has these limitations. I am reminded of Creator God who has fashioned his creation with precision, skill, and detail. Why did he do that? To declare his glory. He also made me to declare his glory. Lord, help me show forth your glory so that my world may know who you are. Do you know what Jeffrey has decided to do? He has decided to become a missionary to the autistic community in Japan. Unbelievable, right? We can look and see limitations, but love is the great equalizer. And while Jeffrey can't speak a word out of his mouth, he speaks the language of love because love is something that love does. It always protects. It always trusts. It always hopes. It always perseveres. There's something all of us can do, and it's so easy for us to look at our limitations. But love is something we can all do. And so maybe to sum all of this up, we can put it in these terms, and I think it might be more memorable if you would say this in your mind with a Forrest Gump accent. Love is as love does. Because that's what love does. And we might say, well, where do we get that? That's nice sentiment. It's because, as we've been saying all along, it's what God has done for us. The most famous verse in all the Bible, God so loved the world that he what? Had affectionate feelings about it? Sure. That, he did something in response? You bet. God so loved the world that he what? Gave. Love gives. God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, so that whoever believes in him would not perish but have eternal life. That's why we're here. That's why we can celebrate being in a relationship with our great God. It's what he has done for us. And so as we carry out Love Gives, may it be the response, the reflection of what we understand that we have been given. The love of God that we are called to make real in this world. Love is as love does, and what love does, love gives. Would you bow your heads together with me as I pray? And so God, on this day, we just are amazed at who you are and all that you have done. To think that the God of this universe, born out of a heart filled with love, has reached all the way down to this broken world, these broken hearts and lives of ours. And God, you didn't meet us halfway. You came all the way to where we are, and you invited us to you. You invited us in. You invited us to put hope and trust in you. And God, inside of that relationship, we are transformed. And so God, as we live on the other side of that incredible news, right? The news, it's not our accomplishment, it's your rescue that has come to us. God, help us to make real the kind of love that expresses the reflection of what you have poured out on us. And so God, over these next number of weeks, would you help that to become the reality? And as we do that, God, would you just transform us as well? We're on a journey that we hope and pray will lead us closer and closer to you. And so, God, do your work in us as well. And we ask and pray all of this in the powerful name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
We hope you enjoyed today's message. If you found this sermon meaningful, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach more people and spread the word. Stay connected with us throughout the week by following us on social media at Washington Heights Church on Facebook and Instagram, and by visiting our website at whc.faith. For more information and additional resources, check out the podcast description below. Thank you for joining us. See you next week.